The fall that never ended. The story of Nadjugo. What if a single moment asleep, a fall could change everything? What if that fall didn't end a story, but began a nightmare that haunted a family for generations? Today, I'm telling you the story of Nadjugo, a man whose pride and love nearly cost him everything, and a curse that wouldn't let go. Make sure you watch until the end, because this story does not end where you expect. The sun was just stretching its golden arms across the village, casting long, soft shadows on the cracked red earth. Women in colorful wrappers moved with purpose, preparing their morning meals, while children's laughter filled the air, chasing each other beneath the tall, whispering palm trees. In the heart of this peaceful village lived Nadjugo, a man known for his skill as the best palm wine tapper in the land, and for his fierce pride as a husband. That morning, like many before, Nadjugo climbed the tallest palm tree, machete strapped at his side, sweat glistening on his skin. He was in a hurry. His wife was waiting, and he promised her a beautiful meeting cloth from the market. In their village, a man's worth was often measured by the grace his wife carried, and Nadjugo was determined not to fail. But fate had other plans. His foot slipped. For a frozen moment, Nadjugo hung suspended, the machete slipping from his grasp, spinning wildly in the morning light. Then gravity took hold. He tumbled, crashing through sharp palm fronds, his body battered by branches and thorns. The world turned upside down in a dizzying blur of pain and sound. The ground hit him with a sickening crack. For a long moment, everything was still. Did Nadjugo survive? Was this the end of a proud man, or just the beginning of a darker story? Against all odds, Nadjugo survived. Though his leg was broken, and his back forever bent like the oldest tree in the forest, his spirit burned strong. He dragged himself back to the village, the whispers of the forest following him like shadows. He built a small hut near the edge of the trees, where his wife cooked, and his children played barefoot in the dusty yard. But the forest was not done with Nadjugo. Whispers returned to the night, soft as leaves brushing the earth. Shadows flickered at the edge of the firelight, twisted, thin figures with hollow eyes and limbs like broken branches. One night, his younger son, Kwame, woke gasping, the dark too deep, the air too still. A voice, cold and reedy like dry leaves scraping stone, hissed. "Leave. This land is not yours." What was haunting them? Could Nadjugo protect his family, or was the forest curse too strong? Bent and broken, machete in hand, Nadjugo confronted the darkness. "Leave my children alone," he roared, his voice trembling but fierce. For a moment, the shadows shrunk back, but the fear lingered like smoke in the air. The next morning, the ground around their hut was torn and scarred, trees leaning away as if alive and angry. Tormented, the family fled, crossing a muddy river under stormy skies. They left behind everything but hope, stepping into an uncertain future. But the shadow followed. Nadjugo's palms stopped yielding sap, his hands trembled, and the wine turned bitter. On one ungodly afternoon, Nadjugo died, bent and broken, his eyes wide and glassy, mouth frozen in a silent scream. His wife's grief was a quiet, haunting thing, her whispers echoing through the empty hut. His children struggled, their futures clouded by the curse they inherited. But Nadjugo's youngest, Kwame, refused to give up. Now a teenager, lean and fierce, he stood before the shadows one night, fist clenched, eyes blazing. "You will not take my family," he screamed. The shadows faltered, breaking like brittle branches in the wind. But before the dawn, scratching came at the door, slow, deliberate, like bone scraping wood. Kwame sat up, heart pounding, breath caught in his throat. Returning to their hometown was not a reprieve. The once familiar faces of their uncles and cousins, who had long abandoned them, now met them with cold, bitter eyes. The family was back, but not as they once were. Nadjugo's wife, weary and silent, tried to carry on with the duties of the household. Yet the once joyful laughter of her children was replaced with hushed tones and nervous glances. The shame of their misfortune seemed to follow them like a shadow that never let go. Kwame felt the burden heavier than anyone. Not just the weight of their circumstances, but the heavy, haunting presence of the spirits that trailed them even here. The whispers, the crackling of dry leaves, it was as if the forest had followed them, its cursed grip reaching into their new life. One evening, as Kwame sat alone by the fire, his fingers tracing the scars on his palm, he noticed the shadows around him seemed different. There was a heaviness in the air, a sickening stillness that made his chest tighten. The faint whisper of voices, familiar voices, rustled like dead leaves beneath the breeze. He knew at that moment, the forest had come to them. What would happen now? Could Kwame stand against the shadows of his ancestors, or had they returned to finish what they started? Days passed, and the unease in the village grew. Kwame's sleep became fitful, his dreams haunted by visions of his father's twisted form, his pale, hollow eyes locked onto him. The whispers never stopped, even during the day. One evening, after a particularly tense argument with his cousins about the family's land, Kwame could bear it no longer. His mother's silence weighed on him, the uncertainty in her eyes pushed him to the edge. In the dead of night, he stepped outside, his feet crunching against the dry earth beneath him. The moon hung high in the sky, casting silver beams over the village. The air was thick, pressing down on him like a weight. Kwame took a deep breath. It was time. "Leave us," he called out, his voice cutting through the night air, stronger than it had ever been. The trees seemed to bend toward him, their branches swaying in the wind as if they heard him, their leaves rustling in response. The ground trembled beneath his feet. He could feel the presence of something old and powerful stirring. A gust of wind swept through the village, pushing the shadows further into the corners of the yard. He didn't know what was coming, but Kwame knew one thing: he would no longer run. Would his defiance be enough? Or was the darkness too strong for even him to conquer? The next night, as the wind howled through the trees, Kwame stood at the edge of the village, just beyond the last of the huts. The firelight flickered weakly behind him, casting long shadows on the dirt path. In the distance, he could see the outline of the forest, dark, imposing, and alive with something ancient. Then, a voice broke through the wind. It was not human, nor was it animal. The voice seemed to come from the trees themselves, deep and hollow. Kwame's heart raced, but he did not falter. The spirits of the forest had haunted his family for so long. It was time to face them. It was time to end it. He gripped his machete tightly, its weight grounding him. "I will not let you take my family." He took a step forward. And then another. The ground cracked beneath his feet as the forest seemed to come alive. The trees groaned, their twisted branches stretching toward him like fingers reaching for a lost soul. The shadows began to take shape, flickering between the trunks of the trees. They were there, the spirits. Their hollow eyes, their skeletal hands reaching out, their dark forms swirling in the air. Kwame raised his machete high, his breath steady, his chest pounding with the beat of his own defiance. He could hear the whispers growing louder, the air thick with dread. "Leave us," he shouted again, his voice echoing through the night. The ground shook with a violent force, and the spirits recoiled as if stung. Kwame pressed forward, the fire in his chest burning brighter. With every step, the shadows seemed to shrink, their long limbs and hollow faces fading as if the light within him was pushing them back. The wind howled like a dying animal, but Kwame stood firm, his feet planted in the earth, his resolve solid. And then, just as the last shadow retreated into the trees, the wind fell silent. The air grew still, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Kwame could hear nothing but his own breath. Had Kwame finally broken the curse? Or had the darkness only been waiting for the right moment to strike back? The following morning, the village was calm. Too calm. The air was crisp, the birds sang in the trees, and the sun rose over the horizon as if nothing had ever happened. Kwame stood at the edge of the village, the early light catching the edge of his machete. His family, his mother and siblings, stood behind him, their faces weary but relieved. They no longer looked over their shoulders and jumped at every whisper in the wind. But Kwame couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching. He glanced back at the forest, its trees now standing tall, silent, and still. The shadows that had once twisted through the branches seemed to have retreated. But Kwame knew better. "It's not over yet," he whispered to himself, knowing that the spirits had not truly left. They would return. They always did. As the last sun's rays sank behind the trees, Kwame turned back toward his family. His eyes were filled with determination and the weight of the unknown. The forest may have retreated for now. But Kwame knew this: the darkness would always return. What happens next? Will Kwame and his family ever find peace, or is the curse waiting to strike again? If you want to find out, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because this story is far from over.